The last few months have been absolutely ridiculous for brand new Nintendo Switch games. And whilst there's been a fair share of incredible games that I can't put down, there's also been a few disappointing ones as well. So today I'm going to go through 5 of my favourite new Switch games that I can't put down, and a few I think you might want to avoid. But as always, if you want to keep up to date with all things new and cozy on the Nintendo Switch, make sure you subscribe, and let's get started with the Cosmic Wheel of Sisterhood. Now, it's no secret that Coffee Talk has been one of my favourite games that I've played on my Switch. And for the longest time, I've been looking for a game that encapsulates the same vibes, but is also something a little bit different. And I feel like the Cosmic Wheel of Sisterhood was exactly what I've been looking for. This is a narrative experience where you play as Fortuna, a witch who's been exiled on an asteroid for 200 years, with another 800 left to go. So in absolute desperation, she forms a pact with a forbidden creature called a behemoth, in the hopes of trying to regain her freedom, or at least just not lose her mind. Now, much like Coffee Talk, this is another one of those games where your decisions really do matter, but I really like the form in which they've done it in, because each witch has different magical abilities. And it just so happens that Fortuna can tell the future by reading her cards. And it's who you choose to help and how you use these cards that decide not only your future, but also the entire future of your coven as well. I really like this idea of storytelling and decision making done in the way in which you pull the cards. First of all, you will ask whichever character you're helping a few questions, and one by one you'll draw different cards which you created and place them in the different spots for which questions they asked. Then you'll be given a series of different options as to how to interpret these cards, which you then tell to the character. And the future in which you speak to each of these characters then influences how they go about their lives, and therefore the story that will happen in front of you. The writing of each of the characters is incredible, and I love the dynamic that you shared with your friends, the behemoth, and even strangers in which you need to keep your secret from them. And sometimes I'd think I'm making a really small decision, and then later on in the game you kind of discover the way in which that one little thing you did really affects the game. And if you needed more proof that your decisions really truly matter, there are 7 different endings to the game. So there is plenty of replay value in it as well. Honestly, this has to be one of my favorite cozy games of the year, and definitely one of my favorite narrative experiences. I just love the personalization of all of it. Like, not only do you get to pick which way you go with the story, but each and every card in your tarot deck you have personally made. And although it is a bit fiddly on the Switch because of using a controller to do it if you have it docked, it's still worth it, and I could make some pretty cool cards if I say so myself. It's such an underrated game, I can't suggest it enough. Definitely go pick it up if you're a lover of Coffee Talk. Just bear in mind this has an awful lot of adult topics in it. Next up, let's do a game you potentially might want to avoid on the Switch, and that is Mineko's Night Market. Yeah, I know. Now, it's not to say this game is bad, it's just badly optimized for the Switch, and for a lot of people, it's made it near impossible to play. Mineko's Night Market is easily one of the most wholesome and joyful experiences I've had on the Switch all year. And it's a game all about friendship, Japanese tradition, and a lot of cats. You play as Mineko, who's arrived at her brand new home in a Japanese-inspired island. An island who used to worship the sun cat Neko. And whilst this was long considered to be just a myth, Mineko arrives to this town with secret agents everywhere seeming to trap cats, and also residents saying that they've seen this sun god themselves. So it becomes up to you to not only go and discover all the secrets around Neko, but also try and help this struggling village. With the tasks you do for each villager not only benefiting you, but also helping to turn the village around, with them being able to upgrade and improve their houses with every task you do for them. Now, a lot of the things you do in Mineko's Night Market revolve around you having money, and the best way to do that is to go to the night market, which is every Saturday night. Because each Saturday you get a set-up shop and different villagers from across the town will come in to buy your goods, with whatever you sell at the night market going for substantially more money than if you just sold it in the days in between. But the strengths of Mineko's night market not only lie in the incredible writing that saw me smiling ear to ear constantly, but also in the mini games. Because each Saturday when you finish selling your goods at the night market, there's a different mini game activity to be done each and every week. These were so special, a lot of fun, and honestly it had me hooked to the game as I just wanted to see what the next week had in store. Now, the very beginning of the game was a little bit grindy for not only money, but also the fact that you ran out of stamina really fast. This definitely got better in the game as it went along. The menus were also super awkward and you couldn't do anything in bulk, which was kind of sad. So sometimes I found myself almost rushing through each of the days to kind of make it to the night market, which was my favorite part. But the writing was so strong, I think it kind of made up for all of this. So overall, it was an awful lot of fun, apart from one thing, which is almost game breaking, and that's the loading times. I'm going to put it on the screen right now to show you exactly what I'm talking about, but there are not only a lot of different loading screens, they're also incredibly long. The loading screens happen whenever you go inside of your house, change outfit, outside of your house, into shops, or to different areas on the map. I'm not normally the biggest fan of having that many loading areas full stop, but it's the length of time in which they last that is currently the deal breaker. And it's so bad that Mineko's Night Market have issued a tweet to say they are aware of this issue and that they're going to be fixing it. But as you can see on the screen down below, they are really, really long. Like, I would try and play Mineko's Night Market before I went to bed each night, and I found myself falling asleep from waiting so long for the next thing to load. So right now, I'd say probably give this game a miss or buy it on the PC, as it's not nearly as bad there as it is on the Switch. Honestly, such a shame as it is such a fun game. Next, we have Fae Farm. Now, I've already done a pretty extensive review about everything I love and dislike about the game. But if we're making a list of the games I've spent the most amount of hours on in the last few months, this is number one. In fact, I have multiple saves going. I have the save on my Nintendo Switch where I just kind of speedrun the story. And then I have a save on my PC where I took things a little bit slower. Because I think even in my review where I spent a solid 30 hours in the game, I missed out on so many aspects of it. Like, for example, in my review, I didn't even touch on flower breeding. As for once, I have a reason to partake in flower breeding because it has a purpose, because you need them to dye clothes and, more importantly, buy more wings. But you also have animal breeding as well, where you can get different colored animals. If you don't know, Fae Farm is a farming sim. And in almost every aspect, this is one of the best farming sims I feel like I've played. Apart from one big one, and that is the people and the festivals. For me personally, I've never been big on the relationship side of farming sims. And it's just refreshing to have a game where you can skip the text and there's no consequences. Like, for me, this is the perfect game to sit down, put on my favorite TV show, which I've just started watching Once Upon a Time, and I can't believe it's taken me this long because it's so good, but I'll watch that and play Fae Farm at the same time, and it is the perfect evening. Also, I'm not someone who typically likes to decorate in games, but I found myself really enjoying decorating in Fae Farm. I think the main downside is there's so many fun aspects to the game that you can so easily miss. If it wasn't for people in my Twitch chat saying, "Hey Eeowna, did you know you could do this?" I don't think I would have found some of these mechanics. Either way, I know I said it's a bit overpriced, and I still stand by that because I think it is, considering we don't know what is going to be involved in the DLC. But so long as you don't mind really shallow interactions with the villagers in the town, it is a pretty solid pick. Speaking of overpriced games, let's talk about the brand new Harvest Moon. And at full price, I'm going to say this is potentially an avoid. Again, not a bad game, just a badly priced one. Now, if you consider Fae Farm to be at the low end of the tech spectrum when it comes to farming sims, Harvest Moon Winds of Anthos is the complete polar opposite. There is so much dialogue, which I unfortunately don't think that's always a good thing. Harvest Moon, The Winds of Anthos is another farming sim that for some reason costs more money when you buy it on the Nintendo Switch compared to every other platform, but we'll get to that in a second. One thing I did like about this farming sim though is the backstory, because basically it doesn't involve any grandparents dying, and that in itself is groundbreaking. 10 years ago, the world of Anthos experienced several volcanic eruptions that threatened all life that lived on Anthos. So the harvest goddess and her harvest sprites used all of their energy in order to keep the people and the animals safe. This meant that every single village dotted across the land were blocked off from one another. And unfortunately, this meant some families were even separated. The harvest goddess, though, didn't give up hope, and she sent out a bottle in a letter with a magic key before falling in a deep slumber. And 10 years later, you find this bottle, and it becomes your job to try and reunite the land once again. Now, one thing I have to give the game credit for is on the Nintendo Switch, this runs so well. It honestly shocked me how good this game looks. Now, unlike Fae Farm, the characters do have a lot of life to them, which is good considering each of them have so much text. And the farming sim mechanics themselves were actually surprisingly streamlined and easy. This is one thing Storia Seasons need to take note on, because compared to Storia Seasons A Wonderful Life, farming is a breeze in Winds of Anthos. And I will admit, this exceeded my incredibly low expectations of the game, but I do think it's overpriced. They kind of went for size over substance with this game, and I don't fully understand the logic. The map in the Winds of Anthos is absolutely massive. The only issue is, it's not all that fun to explore. The first big issue is you can't jump, and I don't understand why. This means that you'll come up to the tiniest of ledges, and instead of it allowing you to jump off so you can take a shortcut, you have to run around the entire thing. This makes traveling the land really frustrating and not a lot of fun. The other thing is, the land is just really barren. Now, I must admit, compared to previous Harvest Moon games, there are definitely a lot more trees, and there's even a bit of wildlife and a few sprites thrown in as well. That being said, it's so empty. So far, I haven't seen any NPCs walking around, and it kind of feels pointless, like you're just doing it to get over to the next town. So whilst I enjoyed everything that was happening inside of the towns I was going to, the main selling point of the game, this almost open world experience and this ability to travel and explore, wasn't all that fun. And I have heard that even when you get a horse later on, the horse can't jump either. Me and the stamina mechanic also had issues. I personally don't think in a farming sim the ability to run or sprint should be locked behind stamina, which this does. But in addition to that, even just walking around lowers your stamina, on top of then going to the mines or farming, which also therefore takes stamina as well. Again, for a game that puts such a big premise on exploring, it really does hinder you from the very beginning from just being able to do that. You will be able to increase your stamina later on, but this really adds even more to the slow burning start of a normal farming sim. And oh boy, was the tutorial section long. I think it took me several hours to step out of the initial town alone. So let's kind of get on with the price. I have two issues with this. The base game itself, I think, is £43 on the Switch, £41 on every other platform. But the issue really lies in the DLC. The DLC price by itself isn't too bad. It works out to be about £12. But my issue is kind of what they've decided to put in it. One pack will have brand new visitors and characters. Another pack, which you can already buy for $3, has new animals that you can have as pets. But then the weird ones to me is the fact that the next one has a tool upgrade included in it, which I think is a really weird decision to paywall that. Then there's also new interior items, which I'm fine with. Animal Crossing did a similar thing. And then new crops, fish, and recipes also in the final pack. So this brings the price of the game and all the DLCs to substantially higher than even Fae Farm. And I'm not convinced from what I've seen so far that this is worth the price. So I'm not saying this is a bad game. I'm just saying this is a badly priced game. So one that I'd say pick up when it's on sale. I bet there's going to be a Christmas sale of this. And maybe don't pay full price. But it was surprisingly good. I did have a lot of fun when I was in the towns, and the missions and the tasks you get to do are a lot of fun as well. I just wish the world was smaller with a bit more in it. Then we have Sea of Stars. This is easily one of the prettiest RPGs I have seen and the most amount of fun I've had in one in a very long time. But the thing I love the most about it is you can completely tailor your experience to whatever combat you feel like doing. And that's why I've deemed it cozy, because the story that goes alongside of it is absolutely fantastic. This turn-based RPG tells the story of two children of the solstice, each with their own abilities, one with the powers of the sun and the other the power of the moon. And together it's up to them to fight off the forces of evil. And not only is the game's overarching story incredible, there's also so much character development in it as well. And even just the prologue alone made me feel like I knew these characters so well. The strength of Sea of Stars, though, is definitely on the theme of friendship. The dialogue and the interactions between each of the characters is really special. And it felt like no person you spoke to was a waste of time. And it's with these friends that you'll travel across the land, solving puzzles and fighting foes. With the puzzles feeling pretty reminiscent of old school Zelda in the best way, and I really did enjoy them. And even the combat felt pretty unique as well. Now obviously, as I said earlier, you can tailor this experience, but there's a few things the combat has that just make it feel a little bit different to every other turn-based game. First of all, the combat involves pressing buttons in sync. This either increases the amount of damage you have if you press the button at the same time your character hits an enemy, or if you press the button the same time you get hit by an enemy, you'll take less damage. This means that if you have this on, you always remain engaged in battles, as sometimes when I play turn-based battles, I can feel my brain sort of switching off. Then, like typical RPGs, you also have the ability to use skills which cost action points. But one thing I really did like is the ability to do combos with different characters as well. This kind of brings them together to do joint attacks, because when an enemy wants to do their special attack, you'll have to hit them with certain elements of damage to try and stop this attack from happening. And I found this battle mechanic to actually be super rewarding. It wasn't so complicated that I couldn't get a grip on it, but it did gradually wind up in difficulty, and the more people you add to your team, the more complex these enemies get, and I really did like it. But the best part is, if you don't want to do some of this, you don't really have to. Throughout the game, you can find these charms, and they have different effects. At the end of the prologue, you get given two. One of them will make battles harder for you, and the other one will double your HP and make it so that every single attack and every time you are attacked, it automatically gives you the bonus of perfectly timing your attack. But the helping hands don't end there. Every single time you have a boss fight, outside of it, you'll find a merchant selling stuff, and not only can you buy ingredients to cook up meals so that you have extra HP for battle, you also have the ability to buy extra charms, and these seem to be very much tailored for the boss battle you're going into. So say for example, you've tried again and again and you can't beat a boss, you can go buy one of the charms that will make a certain aspect easier, and hopefully you can beat it then. All of this put together has made this one of my favorite games I've played this year. I can't recommend it enough, and it runs brilliantly on the Switch as well, so definitely worth picking up if you're into this sort of vibe. Another game I have been obsessed with recently is Stray Gods. And I'm gonna be real, I cried multiple times. Just to give you some idea about the length, it took me 7 hours to complete my first playthrough of the game, which definitely is on the pricier side, but I had a lot of fun playing it. It's very unique, and there is some replay value to it. Stray Gods is a narrative experience that's also a musical, and you play as Grace, who is granted the power of a muse after the previous muse winds up dead at her house. You're then dragged in front of a group of Greek gods who accuse you of murdering her, and you have 1 week to try and prove your innocence. And your decisions about who to trust and who Grace allies with will determine her fate. I really like this comic book style of the game, as it got you to really focus on the lyrics and less on what is happening in front of you on the screen. And although not every single one of the songs in the game is a bop, some of them are really, really good. But the incredible thing about the music is every single one of the big decisions you make in the game is done through a musical number, as Grace has the power of a muse. This basically means that she can coax out the truth or how someone is feeling by getting them to sing. and the narrative decisions you make mid-song determine how these interactions go. That means every dialogue option you choose has a different part of a song associated to it. So the amount of work and time that has gone into each of these musical numbers is wild because there's so many decisions in each of the songs. Personally, I really love their depiction of each of the Greek gods. Because yes, whilst they are the Greek gods of legend, this depicts them in a way more modern setting, with some of them being able to adapt to current society and others being left in the past. And this winds up having some really interesting interactions with some of the classical gods. I sometimes find when I'm playing narrative games that I find the constant dialogue options to be tedious. I'm a completionist, and if there's a dialogue option, I'm going to click through each and every one of them until there's no more of them left. But for once in Stray Gods, this didn't feel like a chore. Each of the bits of information I found out seemed useful and seemed like they helped the overarching story or helped me to get to know each of the Greek gods a little bit more. And it's definitely helped by the fact that every single line of dialogue, every part of the song is all fully voice acted. Now, there is one thing to bear in mind. Unlike the Cosmic Wheel of Sisterhood, your decisions aren't quite that massive. I think the overarching story remains mostly the same, but just some of the outcomes of some of the characters do change at the end, depending on which branch you picked. So just something to bear in mind that this doesn't quite have the same replay value as other narrative games, but the fact that it's a musical adds a beautiful twist. Finishing us off today is another game I've been obsessed with. Now, this isn't new, but it is new to me, and this is Eastward. I decided to pick this up after seeing the DLC in the Nintendo Direct, and finally decided it was time. Eastward is an adventure game set in the near future where society has begun to collapse. The human population is dwindling as a toxic presence has spread across the land, destroying everything in its path and forcing the human population underground. And to this day, you're told that the outside world is dangerous and is definitely a place you don't want to go. The story follows John and Sam. After a series of unfortunate events, they wind up being sent to the surface, an exile which many believed is a death sentence. However, once you step off the train, you see green grass and blue skies. And suddenly this becomes an adventure across the world. Now, this game truly has a little bit of everything. First of all, the story and the dialogue is fantastic. But you'll also find yourself walking through areas that are kind of like Zelda dungeons, where you'll have little puzzles to solve as you can alternate between controlling Sam, who has these bubble-like abilities, or John, who has a frying pan and bombs. And you can either move them together or separately to help get through these spaces. And whilst there is combat, so far it's kind of been hack and slashy and not too bad, with most of the boss battles kind of being, again, Zelda reminiscent, with it not being skill-based in terms of combat, with instead you figuring out the boss's phases and also the method in which to attack them. But to me, the real strength of this game is the exploration. Everywhere you go, you meet different characters, and the way they're written is just fantastic. They're oozing with personality, and it's made it so I just simply can't put it down. And with the DLC only coming out in winter, I thought this was the perfect time to get into it, as it's been the perfect game to curl up with each and every night. Those are my top 5 games that I've played recently, along with a couple you might want to avoid on the Switch. Let me know which ones you've been having a blast with recently in the comments down below. And don't worry, I am going to do a rankings video very soon. I just need to put a few more hours into a couple of games before I feel comfortable giving my opinion. If you want to get caught up on all the cozy news though, click this video here.